The blood on her dress had dried to a rust-brown stain by the time Penelope Vaughn stumbled into Pecos, Texas, clutching nothing but a worn carpet bag and the tattered remains of her dignity. The August heat of 1878 bore down mercilessly as she stood at the edge of town, watching the dusty Main Street shimmer in waves that made the buildings look like they were melting into the earth itself. She had walked 17 miles since the stagecoach robbery, her shoes splitting at the seams, her throat so parched she could barely swallow. The blood was not hers, though she wished desperately that she could forget whose it was. A man on horseback rode past without stopping, his eyes sliding over her like she was just another piece of desert debris blown in by the wind. Penelope understood. She looked like trouble, and in a frontier town where survival depended on keeping your nose out of other people's business, nobody wanted trouble darkening their doorstep. She kept walking, her legs trembling with exhaustion, until she reached what appeared to be a general store. Through the window, she could see shelves stocked with goods, and more importantly, she could see people inside who looked clean and fed and safe. The bell above the door chimed when she entered, and every conversation stopped. 3 women clustered near a display of fabric bolts turned to stare. A man weighing out flour at the counter paused mid-scoop. The shopkeeper, a round-faced woman with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, looked her up and down with an expression somewhere between pity and suspicion. "I need work," Penelope said, her voice coming out as barely more than a rasp. "I can clean, cook, sew. I am educated, I can read and write and do figures. I will work for room and board until I can afford passage back east." The shopkeeper exchanged glances with the other women. One of them, younger with kind eyes, stepped forward. "What happened to you, dear?" Penelope's hands tightened on her carpet bag. "Stagecoach was robbed 2 days north. I would prefer not to discuss the details." "Was anyone hurt?" The kind-eyed woman pressed gently. The image of the driver slumping forward, the wet sound of his body hitting the ground, the way the outlaws had laughed, flashed through Penelope's mind. She closed her eyes briefly. "Yes." "Sweet mercy," the shopkeeper breathed. "You walked all the way here from the holdup?" "I did not feel safe waiting with the coach," Penelope said carefully. It was not the whole truth, but it was true enough. She had not felt safe waiting with the men who had robbed them, who had looked at her with eyes that promised worse things than theft. So she had run when they were distracted, dividing up their spoils, and she had kept running until running turned to walking and walking turned to stumbling. The kind-eyed woman touched the shopkeeper's arm. "Martha, she needs help." Martha, the shopkeeper, studied Penelope for a long moment. "I cannot hire anyone just now. Business has been slow." She paused, considering. "But Bennett Holloway has been looking for someone to help keep house. His wife passed 6 months ago, and his place has gone to seed something fierce. He has 2 young children who need looking after." Penelope felt hope flicker in her chest, fragile as a candle flame in a storm. "Where can I find him?" "He has a ranch about 3 miles west of town, but I should warn you," Martha said, her voice dropping lower. "Bennett is a good man, one of the best around these parts, but he has been hard and bitter since losing Mary. The grief has changed him. He is not easy to be around anymore." "I do not need him to be easy," Penelope replied. "I need honest work and a safe place to sleep." Martha nodded slowly. "Fair enough. My husband can drive you out there when he finishes his deliveries this afternoon. You look like you are about to collapse where you stand. Come on back to the storeroom, and I will fix you something to eat and drink." The next few hours passed in a blur of cool water, bread with butter, and the blessed relief of sitting down. Penelope tried to clean herself up as best she could in the small washroom behind the store, scrubbing at the blood stains until her hands ached. The stains had set too deeply into the fabric to come out completely, but at least she no longer looked quite so much like she had walked out of a nightmare. When Martha's husband, a taciturn man named George, loaded her into his delivery wagon, the sun was beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Penelope had the energy to appreciate beauty. Instead, she focused on breathing steadily, on not letting the panic that had been her constant companion for 2 days overwhelm her completely. The Holloway ranch appeared gradually, rising out of the flat scrubland like a promise. It was not grand, but it was substantial. A two-story house with a wraparound porch, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals holding horses and cattle. Everything looked well maintained, though Martha had been right about the house itself. Even from a distance, Penelope could see laundry hanging forgotten on a line, weeds growing up around the porch steps, and windows that desperately needed cleaning. George pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "I will wait here while you talk to him," he said. "Just in case." Just in case of what, he did not specify, but Penelope was grateful nonetheless. She climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the ride, and approached the front door. Before she could knock, it swung open, and a little girl of about 6 years old stood there, her dark hair tangled and her dress buttoned wrong. "Hello?" Penelope said gently. "Is your father home?" The child nodded solemnly, then turned and shouted into the house, "Papa, there is a lady here." Heavy footsteps sounded from somewhere inside, and then a man appeared behind the little girl. Bennett Holloway was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of slate. He had the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors, with sun lines at the corners of his eyes and calluses visible on his hands where they rested on his daughter's shoulders. He was perhaps 30 years old, though grief and hard work had carved lines into his face that made him look older. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough, wary. Penelope straightened her spine and met his gaze directly. "My name is Penelope Vaughn. Martha at the general store said you might need someone to help with housekeeping and minding your children. I am looking for work." Bennett's eyes traveled over her, taking in her disheveled appearance, the stains on her dress, the exhaustion evident in every line of her body. His expression did not change. "Where are you from?" "Philadelphia, originally. Most recently from Santa Fe." "What brings you to Pecos?" "Misfortune," Penelope said honestly. "The stagecoach I was traveling on was robbed. I need work and a place to stay until I can afford to continue my journey." Something flickered in Bennett's eyes. Not quite sympathy, but perhaps understanding. "I have 2 children. Sarah here and my son Thomas is 4. The house needs cleaning, meals need cooking, laundry needs doing. The work is hard and the days are long. I can offer room and board, plus $15 a month." "That is generous," Penelope said, relief flooding through her. "There is one condition," Bennett continued, his voice hardening slightly. "You sleep in the barn." Penelope blinked, certain she had misheard. "I beg your pardon?" "The barn," Bennett repeated. "I have fixed up the loft. It is clean and dry with a good bed and blankets. But I will not have a stranger sleeping under the same roof as my children. Not until I know you can be trusted." The words stung, but Penelope understood them. She was a stranger who had appeared out of nowhere with blood on her clothes and desperation in her eyes. If she had been a man with children, she would have been cautious too. "I understand," she said quietly. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning. Be at the house by sunrise." "I have nowhere else to go tonight," Penelope admitted. "Might I sleep in the barn tonight and begin work tomorrow as you said?" Bennett studied her for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "I will show you where you will be staying." He looked down at his daughter. "Sarah, go find your brother and make sure he is not getting into trouble." The little girl scampered off, and Bennett stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind him. He walked toward the barn without checking to see if Penelope was following, his stride long and purposeful. She hurried after him, waving her thanks to George, who tipped his hat and turned his wagon back toward town. The barn was larger up close than it had appeared from a distance. Bennett pushed open the wide doors, and the smell of hay and horses and leather washed over them. He led her past the horse stalls to a ladder that climbed up into the loft. Up there, he said. Penelope climbed the ladder, her tired muscles protesting every rung. The loft was spacious and surprisingly well organized. Hay bales were stacked neatly along one wall, and in the far corner, someone had created a small living space. There was a narrow bed with a thick mattress, several wool blankets folded at the foot, a small table with a lantern, and even a wooden chair. A curtain could be drawn across the space for privacy. "My hired hand used to sleep up here before he moved on last year," Bennett called up from below. "It is not fancy, but it is warm and dry." "It is more than adequate," Penelope replied, meaning it. After 2 days of walking through the desert and sleeping on hard ground, anywhere with a real bed looked like luxury. "Thank you." Bennett grunted something that might have been acknowledgement and disappeared back down the ladder. Penelope heard his footsteps retreat, heard the barn door close, and then she was alone with the gentle sounds of horses moving in their stalls below and the soft cooing of pigeons roosting in the rafters. She sank down onto the bed and finally allowed herself to cry. She cried for the stagecoach driver who had died trying to protect his passengers. She cried for her own terror and helplessness. She cried for the life she had left behind in Philadelphia, for the scandal that had driven her west in the first place, for the brother in Santa Fe who had promised to take her in and then died of pneumonia a week before she arrived. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she lay down on the bed fully clothed and fell into an exhausted sleep. She woke before dawn to the sounds of the ranch coming to life, roosters crowing, horses nickering for their breakfast, the low lowing of cattle in the distance. Penelope sat up, disoriented for a moment before memory came flooding back. The barn, the ranch, her new position. She needed to get to the house by sunrise. She did her best to make herself presentable with the limited resources available to her. Her carpet bag contained one change of clothes, a hairbrush, a few other necessities. She changed into her other dress, a simple gray cotton that was worn but clean, and brushed her honey-colored hair until it shone before pinning it up in a neat bun. Her reflection in the small hand mirror she carried showed a woman of 23 with green eyes still shadowed by exhaustion and fear, but determined nonetheless. The walk from the barn to the house took only a minute, but Penelope spent that minute studying her new surroundings in the growing light. The ranch was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. The land stretched out flat and endless, interrupted only by scrub brush and the occasional stubborn tree. The sky was already brightening, promising another scorching day. She knocked on the front door and waited. After a moment, Bennett opened it. He had clearly been awake for hours already. His hair was damp, probably from washing at the pump, and he smelled like soap and leather, and something else, something distinctly masculine that made Penelope oddly self-conscious. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The interior of the house confirmed everything Martha had said. It was a good house, solidly built with real wooden floors and glass windows, but it desperately needed attention. Dishes were piled in the kitchen basin. Dust covered every surface. Children's toys lay scattered across the floor. The smell of burnt food lingered in the air, suggesting many unsuccessful attempts at cooking. "The children are still asleep," Bennett said. "I usually wake them around 6. They will need breakfast. There is food in the pantry and the icebox, eggs in the hen house. You can figure out where everything is as you go. I will be out working the ranch. I come in at noon for dinner and again at sunset for supper. Any questions? What do the children like to eat?" Bennett looked momentarily taken aback, as if this was not a question he had anticipated. "They like most things. Sarah is fond of biscuits. Thomas will eat anything if you put enough butter on it. Allergies? Foods they cannot have? No, nothing like that. Bedtime? 7:30 for Thomas, 8 for Sarah." Penelope nodded, filing away the information. "I will take good care of them, Mr. Holloway." His jaw tightened at that, and for a moment his grief was visible on his face like a fresh wound. "See that you do," he said roughly, then turned and strode out of the house without another word. Penelope stood in the quiet kitchen and took a deep breath. Then she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She started with the dishes, heating water on the stove and scrubbing until her hands were raw. Then she moved on to sweeping the floors, wiping down surfaces, organizing the chaos into something resembling order. She found the pantry well stocked with basics: flour, sugar, salt, dried beans, preserved vegetables. The icebox held butter, milk, and a few other perishables. Someone, probably Bennett himself, had been keeping the family fed, but just barely. By the time she heard small feet patting down the stairs, Penelope had biscuits baking in the oven and eggs ready to scramble. Sarah appeared first, still in her nightgown, her dark hair a tangled mess around her face. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and stared at Penelope with wide, uncertain eyes. "Good morning, Sarah," Penelope said warmly. "I am Miss Vaughn. I am going to be helping your father take care of you and your brother. Are you hungry?" Sarah nodded slowly, still wary. "Why do not you go get dressed, and by the time you come back down, breakfast will be ready. Can you help your brother get dressed too?" "I always help Thomas," Sarah said, a note of pride in her small voice. "He does not do the buttons right." "That is very helpful of you," Penelope said. "Your father is lucky to have such a responsible daughter." Something in Sarah's face softened at that, and she turned and ran back upstairs. Penelope heard her calling for her brother, heard the sounds of children moving around, and felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. These children needed her. Maybe that was exactly what she needed too. Breakfast was a tentative affair. Thomas, a sturdy 4-year-old, with his father's dark hair and eyes, was less shy than his sister. He chattered happily about his toy horses and the new calf in the barn, and how Papa had promised he could learn to rope this summer. Sarah was quieter, watching Penelope with those big, serious eyes, eating her biscuits slowly and carefully. "These are good," Sarah said finally, grudgingly, and Penelope smiled. "Thank you. My mother taught me to bake. Would you like to learn how to make biscuits sometime?" Sarah's face lit up. "Really? You would teach me?" "Of course. A girl should know how to make a good biscuit." The days fell into a rhythm after that. Penelope woke before dawn in the barn loft, walked to the house, and worked until long after the sun set. She cooked 3 meals a day, cleaned every corner of the house that had been neglected for months, did mountains of laundry, and most importantly, cared for Sarah and Thomas. The children were starved for attention, for gentleness, for someone to read them stories and play games with them and tuck them in at night with a kiss on the forehead. Bennett remained distant. He came in for meals, ate quickly without comment, and disappeared back outside. He spoke to Penelope only when necessary, his words clipped and businesslike. But she noticed things. She noticed how he always made sure there was plenty of firewood stacked by the kitchen door, how he fixed the squeaky hinge on the pantry without being asked, how he watched his children when he thought no one was looking, his face soft with love and aching with loss. At night, Penelope would return to the barn loft and lie awake, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into sleep. She should have felt lonely there, separated from the family in the house, but instead, she felt safe. The barn was her space, her refuge. No one could enter without her hearing them. She could lock the latch on the inside and know that nothing could reach her while she slept. After the horror of the stagecoach robbery, after years of learning that men could not always be trusted, the distance felt like protection rather than rejection. 3 weeks passed. Summer began its slow transition toward fall, the brutal heat easing into warm days and cool nights. Penelope threw herself into her work with a dedication that surprised even herself. She mended clothes, she tended the kitchen garden that Mary Holloway had planted and that had been slowly dying of neglect. She taught Sarah to bake and Thomas to count to 20. The house transformed under her care, becoming a home again instead of just a structure where people slept and ate. It was a Tuesday evening when everything shifted. Penelope was in the kitchen after supper, washing the dishes while Bennett sat at the table doing accounts by lamplight. The children were already in bed, and the house was quiet except for the splash of water and the scratch of Bennett's pen on paper. "Miss Vaughn," Bennett said suddenly, and Penelope nearly dropped the plate she was holding. He so rarely initiated conversation that the sound of him saying her name was startling. "Yes, Mr. Holloway." The children seemed happier. Sarah laughed yesterday. I had not heard her laugh since before Mary died. Penelope turned to face him, drying her hands on her apron. "They are wonderful children. It is easy to bring out their joy." Bennett set down his pen. "You have done well here. Better than I expected, if I am honest." "Thank you. That means a great deal." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he gathered his papers and stood. "Good night, Miss Vaughn." "Good night, Mr. Holloway." She watched him climb the stairs to the second floor, to the bedroom he had once shared with his wife. Then she finished the dishes, banked the fire in the stove, and made her way across the dark yard to the barn. The horses greeted her with soft nickers. She had grown fond of them over the past weeks, especially the big bay gelding Bennett rode, and the gentle mare who came to the fence whenever Penelope appeared, hoping for treats. She climbed the ladder to the loft, lit her lantern, and prepared for bed. She was nearly asleep when she heard voices outside. Men's voices, raised and angry. Penelope sat up, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. She crept to the loft window that overlooked the yard and peered out carefully. 3 men on horseback had stopped in front of the house. Even in the moonlight, even from a distance, Penelope recognized them. The way they sat their saddles, the shapes of their hats, the sound of their voices. They were 3 of the outlaws who had robbed the stagecoach, who had killed the driver, who had looked at her with eyes full of dark intentions before she ran. Terror, pure and absolute, flooded through her. They had found her. Somehow they had tracked her here. But why? She was nobody. Nothing. She had nothing they could possibly want. Unless they had seen her run. Unless they thought she could identify them. Unless they wanted to make sure she never testified against them if they were caught. The front door of the house opened, and Bennett stepped out onto the porch. Even from the barn, Penelope could see he was holding his rifle. "You are on private property," he called out. "State your business or move on." "We are looking for someone," one of the men said. His voice carried across the yard, and Penelope recognized it. He was the leader, the one who had shot the driver. "A woman, pretty little thing with light hair. Might have come through town a few weeks back." "I do not know anything about that," Bennett said. "Now get off my land." "Now, friend, do not be hasty. We just want to ask around. Has anyone new come to work for you recently?" Penelope's breath caught in her throat. She saw Bennett's shoulders tense. "My affairs are my own. I am telling you one last time. Leave." One of the other men laughed. "You going to make us, cowboy? There are 3 of us and 1 of you." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Penelope knew she should stay hidden, should stay safe in the loft, but she could not let Bennett face danger because of her. These men were looking for her, and they would not leave until they found her or convinced themselves she was not here. And if shooting started, Sarah and Thomas were in that house. Before she could talk herself out of it, Penelope climbed down the ladder and walked out of the barn into the moonlit yard. "I am here," she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am the one you are looking for. Leave this family alone." Bennett's head snapped toward her. "Miss Vaughn, get back inside." But the damage was done. The 3 men had seen her, and recognition dawned on their faces. The leader urged his horse forward a few steps. "Well, well, the little bird that flew away. We have been looking for you, sweetheart. You saw our faces. That makes you a problem." "I never told anyone," Penelope said quickly. "I came here and I kept my mouth shut. I have no intention of going to the law. Just leave me be, and I will never speak of what happened." "See? That is a real nice offer," the leader said. "But we do not take chances. You are going to have to come with us." Like hell she is, Bennett said, and the click of him cocking his rifle was loud in the night air. I do not know what you think she saw, and I do not care. The woman works for me, and she is under my protection. Touch her, and I will kill all three of you. The man on the left went for his gun. Bennett was faster. The rifle shot cracked through the night, and the man howled as the bullet hit his shoulder. His gun clattered to the ground. Next shot goes through someone's heart, Bennett said coldly. Your choice. Whose? The leader's hand hovered near his pistol, but he didn't draw. The odds had changed. Bennett had proven he could shoot, and he had the high ground on the porch. If this turned into a gunfight, at least one of them would die, maybe more. This is not over, the leader said finally. We will be back. You come back and I will be ready, Bennett replied. And next time, I will not aim for the shoulder. Now ride out before I change my mind about letting you leave at all. The three men wheeled their horses around and galloped off into the darkness. Bennett kept his rifle trained on them until they were out of sight. Then he turned to Penelope. His face was hard as stone. Inside, now, Penelope walked toward the house on shaking legs. She climbed the porch steps, and Bennett followed her inside, shutting and bolting the door behind them. He set his rifle down and lit another lamp, then turned to face her. Talk, he said flatly. Tell me everything. So she did. She told him about the stagecoach robbery, about the driver's death, about the way the outlaws had looked at her. She told him about running, about walking for miles through the desert, about arriving in Pecos with nothing but fear and desperation. She told him everything except the real reason she had been fleeing Philadelphia in the first place, and he did not ask. When she finished, Bennett was silent for a long moment. Then he dragged a hand through his hair and let out a long breath. Those men will come back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but they will come back. You have seen their faces, and that makes you a loose end they cannot afford to leave untied. I am so sorry, Penelope whispered. I have brought danger to your door, to your children. I will leave. I will go tonight. Where exactly will you go? Bennett demanded. You have no money, no means of protecting yourself. They will track you down in a day. At least here you are not alone. I cannot ask you to risk your family for me. You are not asking. I am deciding. Bennett's voice softened slightly. Miss Vaughn, Penelope, those men are outlaws and killers. I will not let them terrorize you or anyone else on my land. We will find a way through this. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. Why? Why would you help me when I have brought nothing but trouble? Bennett looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Because it is the right thing to do, he said finally. Now, you are not sleeping in the barn anymore. Those men know you are here, and if they come back, they will check the barn first. You will sleep in the house where I can protect you. Mr. Holloway, I do not think that is appropriate. I do not give a damn about appropriate right now. I care about keeping you alive. He gestured toward the stairs. There is a spare bedroom on the second floor. It locks from the inside. You will sleep there tonight and every night until this is resolved. Penelope wanted to argue, but she could not deny the logic of his words, and more than that, she could not deny the relief that flooded through her at the thought of sleeping inside the house, protected by walls and locks, and Bennett's steady presence. Thank you, she said quietly. Do not thank me yet. This situation is far from over. Bennett picked up his rifle again. Go on up and get some rest. I am going to stay down here and keep watch. You need to sleep too. I will sleep when I know those bastards are not circling back. Penelope climbed the stairs slowly, aware of Bennett's gaze following her. The spare bedroom was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the front yard. She locked the door as Bennett had instructed, then sat on the edge of the bed and tried to calm her racing heart. She had thought the worst was behind her. She had thought she could start over, build a new life, leave the past buried where it belonged. But the past had found her anyway, and now she had dragged an innocent family into her troubles. Except Bennett had not hesitated. He had stood up to three armed men without flinching. He had protected her without question. Why? They were little more than strangers to each other. She was his employee, nothing more. He owed her nothing. But even as she thought it, Penelope knew it was not quite true. Over the past 3 weeks, something had shifted between them. Small moments that had seemed insignificant at the time suddenly took on new weight. The way Bennett had started saying good morning to her instead of just grunting. The way he had complimented her cooking. The way she had caught him watching her in the garden, his expression unreadable but not cold. She lay down fully clothed and stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be a long time coming. Downstairs, Bennett sat in a chair by the front window with his rifle across his knees, and his thoughts in turmoil. He had meant what he said about protecting Penelope. She was under his roof, under his care, and he would be damned if he let outlaws terrorize her. But there was more to it than that, and he knew it. Somewhere over the past 3 weeks, the brittle shell of grief he had built around himself had started to crack, not because of anything dramatic, but because of small, everyday moments. The sound of Penelope singing while she worked. The way she was so patient with Sarah and Thomas, never losing her temper even when they were difficult. The way the house had started to feel like a home again instead of a tomb filled with memories. He was not ready to care about anyone again. He had loved Mary with his whole heart, and when she died, he had sworn that part of himself was buried with her. But Penelope had slipped past his defenses without even trying, and now he was sitting in the dark with a rifle in his hands, ready to kill to keep her safe. It terrified him. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Bennett's eyes were gritty with exhaustion, but the outlaws had not returned. He heard stirring upstairs and knew the household was waking. He stood and stretched, his back protesting from hours in the chair, and went to start coffee. Penelope appeared first, coming down the stairs quietly. She had changed into a fresh dress, and her hair was neatly pinned, but her face was pale, and shadows darkened her eyes. "Did they come back?" she asked. "No, but we need a plan. I am going to ride into town this morning and talk to the sheriff. Those men need to be identified and hunted down before they hurt anyone else. They will know it was me who told. They already know you can identify them. At this point, we have nothing to lose by going to the law." Penelope nodded slowly. "What about the children? You cannot leave them here unprotected. You will all come with me. I am not leaving any of you alone until this is dealt with." Sarah and Thomas were confused and excited by the unexpected trip to town. They piled into the wagon, chattering happily, unaware of the danger that had darkened their doorstep the night before. Penelope sat next to Bennett on the driver's seat, acutely aware of his solid presence beside her, the way his hands handled the reins with easy competence. The ride to Pecos took an hour. Bennett drove straight to the sheriff's office, a small building near the center of town. The sheriff was a weathered man in his 50s named Jake Morrison, with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. Bennett explained the situation, while Penelope added details about the robbery and the men who had come looking for her. Sheriff Morrison listened carefully, taking notes. "Can you describe them?" he asked Penelope. She described them as best she could. Their builds, their voices, distinguishing features. The sheriff's expression grew grimmer as she spoke. "Sounds like the Garrett gang," he said finally. "Jack Garrett and his brothers. They have been terrorizing stagecoaches between here and Santa Fe for months. We have been trying to track them down, but they are slippery. This is the first solid lead we have had." "What can you do?" Bennett asked. "I will wire the marshal in Santa Fe, let them know we have a witness. I will also put together a posse. If the Garretts are in the area, we need to run them to ground before they hurt anyone else." Morrison looked at Penelope. "You are brave to come forward, Miss Vaughn." Not everyone would. Penelope did not feel brave. She felt terrified, but she nodded and said, I just want them stopped. We will do our best. Morrison turned to Bennett. You keep her safe until we have these men in custody. Do not take any chances. I do not intend to. They left the sheriff's office, and Bennett drove them to the general store. Martha greeted them warmly, fussing over Penelope and the children. While Sarah and Thomas were distracted looking at candy, Bennett bought ammunition and supplies. Penelope noticed he was preparing for trouble, stocking up on things they might need if they had to defend the ranch. The ride back was quieter. The children napped in the back of the wagon, lulled by the motion and the warm sun. Penelope stared out at the endless landscape and tried not to think about what might be coming. Are you all right? Bennett asked quietly. No, Penelope admitted. I'm terrified, but I am also grateful. You did not have to do any of this. Yes, I did, Bennett said simply. It is who I am. Something in the way he said it made Penelope look at him more closely. This hard, grieving man who kept everyone at arm's length was also someone who would risk everything to protect a woman he barely knew. The contradiction fascinated her. Your wife was lucky to have you, she said softly. Bennett's jaw tightened. I was the lucky one. Mary was the best person I ever knew. When she died, something in me died too. I thought I would never feel anything again except duty and responsibility. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was rough. I was wrong. Penelope's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I mean, you have reminded me that life does not end just because someone you love is gone. I mean, watching you with my children, seeing you bring light back into my house has made me remember what it feels like to hope. He did not look at her, keeping his eyes on the road. I mean, I do not want anything to happen to you, and not just because it is my duty to protect you. Penelope could not breathe. Bennett, she whispered, using his given name for the first time. Now he did look at her, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her shiver. I am not ready for this, he said. I am not ready to care about someone again. But ready or not, it is happening. I am not ready either, Penelope confessed. I came west to escape my past, to start over, to be safe. I did not come looking for this. What were you escaping? Penelope hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. A man in Philadelphia who would not take no for an answer. He was wealthy, connected, convinced that I should marry him. When I refused, he started a rumor that I had been his mistress, that I was a fallen woman. My reputation was destroyed. My own family would not speak to me. So I left and went to my brother in Santa Fe, but he died before I arrived. I had nowhere else to go. So I just kept moving until the stagecoach was robbed, and I ended up here. Bennett's expression darkened. Did he hurt you? This man? Not physically, but there are other ways to hurt someone. Yes, there are. Bennett was quiet for a moment. You are safe here, Penelope. I give you my word. No one will hurt you while I am alive to prevent it. The promise hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Penelope wanted to say something, to put into words the feelings that were tangling in her chest, but she did not know how. So instead, she reached over and placed her hand over his where it rested on his knee. Bennett went very still, then turned his hand palm up and laced his fingers through hers. They rode the rest of the way home like that, hands clasped, neither of them speaking, both of them acutely aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. The days that followed were tense. Bennett hired 2 ranch hands from town, men he trusted, to help keep watch. He taught Penelope how to shoot, spending hours in the yard with her, patiently correcting her stance and her aim until she could reliably hit a target at 20 paces. The children thought it was a grand adventure, clapping and cheering when Penelope hit the cans Bennett set up for practice. At night, Penelope slept in the spare room with the door locked, and Bennett slept downstairs on the sofa with his rifle within reach. The barn was abandoned. deemed too dangerous now that the Garrett gang knew she was on the property. Sheriff Morrison sent word that the posse had found tracks and was following them, but so far, the outlaws had eluded capture. Bennett doubled the watch, making sure someone was always awake and alert. The ranch became a fortress, everyone inside aware that danger could arrive at any moment. But life could not stop completely. There were still chores to be done, animals to be fed, children to be cared for. Penelope tried to maintain some sense of normalcy for Sarah and Thomas, reading to them every night before bed, playing games with them in the afternoon, teaching them songs and helping them with their letters. And through it all, she became increasingly aware of Bennett, the way he moved, sure and confident even when he was exhausted, the way he was patient with his children, gentle in a way that contrasted sharply with his hard exterior, the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, his expression a mixture of longing and fear. 2 weeks passed. The posse returned empty-handed, reporting that the Garrett gang had disappeared, likely heading into New Mexico territory, where the law was even more sparse. Sheriff Morrison said he would keep looking, but without more leads, there was little he could do. The best they could hope for was that the outlaws had decided Penelope was not worth the risk and had moved on to easier targets. Bennett was not convinced. "Men like that do not forgive being shot," he said grimly. "They will be back. It is just a question of when." The waiting was excruciating. Every sound at night made Penelope's heart race. Every stranger who rode past the ranch made everyone tense and reach for weapons. It was no way to live, and Penelope could see the strain wearing on all of them. It was a cool evening in early October when Bennett asked Penelope to join him on the porch after the children were in bed. She stepped outside to find him sitting on the top step, staring out at the darkening landscape. She sat down next to him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I have been thinking," Bennett said quietly, "about the future, about what happens when this is finally over." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you came here planning to earn enough money to continue east, but you have become part of this family. Sarah and Thomas adore you. The house is a home again. I do not want you to leave." Penelope's heart clenched. "I do not want to leave either," she admitted. "But Bennett, I am your employee. Eventually people will talk. It is not proper for an unmarried woman to live under the same roof as a widower indefinitely. Then do not be my employee." Bennett turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his expression stole her breath. "Marry me, Penelope. Stay here as my wife, not my housekeeper. Help me raise my children, build a life with me." Penelope stared at him, shocked. "You want to marry me?" "I did not think I would ever want to marry again, but you have changed everything. When I think about the future now, you are in it. You and Sarah and Thomas and a home full of laughter again. I know I am not the easiest man to be around. I know I am still grieving Mary, and probably always will be. But I also know that I am falling in love with you, and I do not want to fight it anymore." Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks. "I thought I would never trust anyone again. After what happened in Philadelphia, after everything I have been through, I thought I was too broken for love. But you have made me feel safe in a way I never have before. You have shown me that not all men are like the ones who hurt me. And yes, Bennett, I am falling in love with you too." He reached up and cupped her face in his rough, calloused hands, wiping her tears away with his thumbs. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," Penelope whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Bennett kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. It was nothing like the forced kisses the man in Philadelphia had stolen from her. This was a question, an offering, a beginning. Penelope kissed him back and felt something inside her that had been frozen for a very long time begin to thaw. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "We should wait until this business with the Garrett gang is settled," Bennett said. "I want to marry you without a threat hanging over our heads." That is sensible, but I want you to know that I am committed to this, to us. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Penelope leaned her head on his shoulder and looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. For the first time since the stagecoach robbery, since fleeing Philadelphia, since watching her careful plans for a new life crumble to dust, she felt hope. The attack came on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks later. Penelope woke to the sound of breaking glass downstairs. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was dreaming, but then she heard men's voices and Bennett shouting, and she knew the nightmare was real. She threw off the blankets and ran to the door, fumbling with the lock. The upstairs hallway was dark, but she could see light from below, probably from the lantern Bennett kept burning all night. She heard footsteps on the stairs and froze. "Penelope!" It was Bennett's voice, urgent and commanding. "Get the children and bar yourself in Sarah's room, now!" She did not question him. She ran to Sarah's room and shook the little girl awake, then grabbed Thomas from his bed. Both children were crying, frightened by the noise and the shouting. Penelope herded them into Sarah's room and shoved the heavy dresser in front of the door. Gunshots rang out downstairs. Penelope's hands shook as she pulled the children away from the door, settling them in the corner farthest from the window. "It is going to be all right," she whispered, holding them close. "Your papa will protect us." But she was not sure she believed it. She had heard at least 3 different voices downstairs. How could Bennett fight them all alone? More gunshots, shouting, the sound of furniture crashing. Then suddenly silence. Penelope held her breath, straining to hear anything that would tell her what was happening. The children whimpered against her, and she stroked their hair and made soothing sounds, even though terror was clawing at her throat. Footsteps on the stairs again. Slow. Heavy. "Penelope!" Bennett's voice, but it sounded wrong. Strained. "It is safe. You can come out." She did not move. Something was not right. "Penelope, I am hurt. I need your help." Still Bennett's voice, but the tone was off. Then she heard it. A second voice, quieter. "Get her out here, or I will burn this whole damn house down with those children inside." They had Bennett. The Garrett gang had him, and they were using him to lure her out. Penelope looked down at Sarah and Thomas, their faces pale and tear-streaked in the moonlight, coming through the window. She thought about the spare pistol Bennett had given her, the one she kept in the drawer of her nightstand. She had left it in her room when she ran to get the children. She was trapped, unarmed, with 2 terrified children depending on her. "Penelope!" This time it was definitely not Bennett speaking, though it was his voice. "You have 1 minute to come out, or I start shooting through this door." She made a decision. "I am coming out," she called, "but only if you let the children stay in here unharmed." "That is fine by me. We only want you, sweetheart." Penelope kissed both children on the forehead. "Stay here," she whispered. "Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, do not come out. Understand?" Sarah nodded, her face fierce with determination even as tears ran down her cheeks. Thomas clung to his sister, too frightened to speak. Penelope moved the dresser aside and opened the door. Bennett was there, held by 2 men. One had a gun pressed to his head. Blood ran down Bennett's face from a cut on his forehead, and he was holding his side like it hurt to breathe. But his eyes were sharp and furious. "I am sorry," he said hoarsely. "I am so sorry, Penelope. I tried to stop them." "Shut up," the man holding him said. It was Jack Garrett, the leader. Penelope recognized his voice from that night, from the stagecoach. "Get downstairs, move!" Penelope descended the stairs slowly, her mind racing through options and finding none. The house was in chaos. Furniture overturned, glass everywhere, bullet holes in the walls. One of the ranch hands was slumped in a corner, not moving. She could not tell if he was dead or unconscious. "There is our little songbird," Jack Garrett said, pushing Bennett down onto a chair and keeping the gun trained on him. His 2 brothers stood nearby, one holding a bleeding arm where someone, probably Bennett, had shot him. You have caused us a lot of trouble, you know that? I just want to live my life in peace, Penelope said, trying to keep her voice steady. I never wanted trouble. Well, you found it anyway. See, me and my brothers, we do not like loose ends. And you are a big loose end. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to come with us nice and quiet. We are going to take a ride out into the desert, and then we are going to make sure you never testify against us. And if I refuse? Jack Garrett smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Then I kill the cowboy and those kids upstairs. Your choice. Bennett surged to his feet despite the gun. Like hell you will touch my children. Jack hit him with the pistol, and Bennett went down hard. Penelope cried out and started toward him, but one of the brothers grabbed her arm and yanked her back. Leave him alone, she screamed. I will go with you. I will do whatever you want. Just do not hurt them. That is more like it, Jack said. He gestured to his brother. Tie her up and get her on a horse. We are done here. Bennett was struggling to get up, blood flowing freely from the new cut on his head. Penelope, no! Do not go with them. I have to, she said, her voice breaking. I cannot let them hurt your children. I cannot let them hurt you. I love you, Bennett said desperately. Penelope, I love you. Do not do this. I love you too, she whispered. Take care of Sarah and Thomas. Tell them I am sorry. The brother was dragging her toward the door when they heard it. Hoofbeats, many of them. Coming fast toward the house. Jack Garrett cursed and ran to the window. It is the law. Damn it, someone must have heard the shots and gone for the sheriff. Everything happened at once then. Jack and his brothers panicked, trying to figure out how to escape. Bennett used the distraction to lunge for the rifle he had dropped during the fight. One of the brothers saw him and raised his gun, but Penelope was faster. She ripped free from the man holding her, grabbed a cast iron pan from the overturned kitchen table, and swung it with all her strength. The heavy pan connected with the brother's head with a sickening thud, and he dropped like a stone. Bennett got his hands on the rifle and fired at Jack Garrett. The shot went wide, but it was enough to make Jack dive for cover. The front door burst open, and Sheriff Morrison and his deputies poured in, guns drawn. The fight was brief and brutal. The Garrett brothers, cornered and outnumbered, tried to shoot their way out. They failed. Within minutes, all three were on the floor, disarmed and in handcuffs. One was unconscious from Penelope's pan strike. Another was bleeding from wounds Bennett had given him earlier. Jack Garrett was cursing and spitting threats, but the fight was over. Penelope ran to Bennett. He had collapsed back into the chair, his face gray with pain. Are you all right? She asked frantically, her hands hovering over him, trying to assess the damage. I will live, he said through gritted teeth. The children? Safe. Still upstairs. Thank God. Bennett caught her hand and held it tight. You should not have stayed. You should have run. And leave you and the children? Never. Penelope leaned down and kissed him gently. We are in this together, remember? That is what you said. Sheriff Morrison approached them. Bennett, you look like hell. We need to get the doc out here. I will be fine. Just some bruised ribs and cuts. Check on my ranch hand first. One of the deputies was already kneeling by the fallen man. He is alive. Knocked out, but alive. Thank God, Bennett said again. Sheriff Morrison looked at Penelope with respect. I heard you took down Charlie Garrett with a frying pan. Cast iron, Penelope corrected, and despite everything, she felt a bubble of slightly hysterical laughter rise in her throat. It was a cast iron pan. Morrison grinned. Even better, Miss Vaughn, you are one hell of a woman. I am a terrified woman who got lucky, Penelope said, but she managed a weak smile. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The doctor arrived and tended to Bennett and the injured ranch hand. Both would recover fully. The Garrett brothers were carted off to jail, where they would await trial. Neighbors arrived, alerted by the gunfire, and helped clean up the worst of the damage. Sarah and Thomas were finally coaxed out of the bedroom and clung to their father and Penelope, needing reassurance that the danger was truly past. By the time dawn broke, the house was somewhat back in order, though it would take more work to repair all the damage. Bennett was in bed on the doctor's orders, his ribs wrapped in strict instructions to rest. Penelope sat beside him, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical thing. "It is over," Bennett said softly. "Really over. The Garrett gang is finished." "I can hardly believe it," Penelope admitted. "I have been running and afraid for so long, I do not remember what it feels like to be safe." "You are safe now. I promise you that." Bennett shifted carefully and winced. "About what I said earlier, about loving you, I meant it. I know you did. I meant it too." Penelope took his hand. "Does your offer still stand? About getting married? Are you sure you want to tie yourself to a beat-up cowboy with 2 children and a ranch that barely turns a profit? I am sure I want to tie myself to the bravest, most honorable man I have ever met, the one who protected me without question, the one whose children I already love like my own, the one who makes me feel things I thought I would never feel again." Bennett smiled, and it transformed his usually stern face. "Then yes, my offer stands. Will you marry me, Penelope Vaughn?" "Yes, Bennett Holloway, yes, I will marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in the church in Pecos, with Sarah and Thomas standing up as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Penelope wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Martha had helped her sew, and Bennett wore his best suit, still moving a bit stiffly from his healing ribs. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Bennett kissed her thoroughly, and the crowd cheered. The reception was held at the ranch, and neighbors brought food and drink and good wishes. Sarah and Thomas ran around with the other children, laughing and playing, their earlier trauma already beginning to fade with the resilience of youth. Penelope watched them and felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Bennett pulled Penelope aside. "How are you holding up, Mrs. Holloway?" Penelope tested the name on her tongue. "Mrs. Holloway, I like the sound of that." "So do I." Bennett wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. "I have something to tell you, and I want you to hear it from me before someone else mentions it." "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just honest." Bennett took a breath. "I loved Mary. She was my first love, my partner, the mother of my children. I will always carry her in my heart, but what I feel for you is not less because I loved her. It is different, but it is just as real and just as deep. You are not a replacement for what I lost. You are something new, something precious in your own right." Tears pricked Penelope's eyes. "I know you loved her. I would never ask you to forget her or pretend she did not exist. She gave you Sarah and Thomas, and for that alone, I am grateful to her. And Bennett, I want you to know that what I feel for you is the first time I have ever truly loved someone. Not obligation or expectation or fear dressed up as affection. Real love, the kind that is honest and fierce and lasting." That is all I needed to hear. Bennett kissed her again, soft and sweet. "Ready to start our life together?" "I have been ready since the moment you chose to protect me instead of turning me away." That night, after the guests had left and the children were asleep, Penelope and Bennett lay together in the bedroom that had once been his and Mary's and was now theirs. The awkwardness Penelope had feared never materialized. Instead, there was tenderness and passion and a sense of rightness that made her understand what people meant when they talked about 2 people fitting together like they were made for each other. Afterward, as they lay in the darkness with Bennett's arms around her, Penelope finally felt the last of her fear drain away. She was home, not just in a physical place, but in a deeper sense. She had found where she belonged. "Are you happy?" Bennett murmured against her hair. Happier than I ever thought possible, Penelope replied honestly. Are you? More than I deserve to be, but I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I could never regret this. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, neither of them had nightmares. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. The ranch was struggling financially, and they had to work hard to turn things around. Penelope threw herself into helping with every aspect of the operation, from keeping the books to helping with branding and roundups. She learned to ride properly, to rope cattle, to mend fences. She was not born to ranch life, but she adapted with determination and grit. Sarah and Thomas adjusted to having Penelope as their mother with surprising ease. She never tried to replace Mary in their hearts, but she made her own place there through love and consistency and always being there when they needed her. Sarah in particular bonded with her, and the two of them would spend hours in the kitchen baking or in the garden tending the vegetables. Bennett proved to be everything Penelope had hoped for in a husband. He was steady and strong, patient with her as she learned the ways of ranch life, passionate in their private moments, and devoted to his family. The grief that had hardened him began to soften, not disappearing entirely, but becoming something he carried with acceptance rather than bitterness. In the spring of 1880, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. She told Bennett on a cool March evening as they sat together on the porch, watching Sarah and Thomas play in the yard. You are going to be a father again, she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Bennett's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, joy, fear, then settling on wonder. A baby, huh? A baby, Penelope confirmed. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. I love you so much, he whispered fiercely. You have given me back my life. You have made me whole again. You did the same for me, Penelope replied, tears of happiness sliding down her cheeks. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. The baby was born in November, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him William, after Bennett's father, and he completed their family in a way that felt ordained. Sarah and Thomas were enthralled with their baby brother, and the house was constantly filled with laughter and noise and love. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, a tiny thing with blonde curls and a sunny disposition. They named her Rose, and she wrapped everyone around her little finger from the moment she drew her first breath. The ranch prospered as the years passed. Bennett's hard work and Penelope's business acumen turned the struggling operation into one of the most successful in the county. They built on to the house, adding more rooms as their family grew. They hired more help, men who became like family themselves. They became pillars of the Pecos community, known for their generosity and fairness. But through all the success and growth and change, the core of their family remained the same. Bennett and Penelope, who had found each other when both were broken and afraid, who had built something beautiful out of their shared pain and courage. They loved fiercely and fought rarely and treasured every day they had together. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, Bennett and Penelope sat on their porch, watching the sunset. Their children were grown, or nearly so. Sarah was married to a good man and living in town with her own family. Thomas was running the ranch alongside his father, a capable young man of 21. William was 18 and talking about going to college in Austin. Only Rose, at 13, was still fully at home, though she too was growing up faster than Penelope liked to think about. Can you believe it has been 17 years? Penelope asked, leaning against Bennett's shoulder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like we have always been together. Bennett pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Do you ever regret it? Staying here, marrying me, giving up the chance to go back east and start fresh? Not for a single moment. This is where I was always meant to be. With you. Penelope tilted her face up to his. Do you ever regret taking in a strange woman with blood on her dress and trouble on her heels? Bennett smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. Best decision I ever made, sleeping in that barn until you trusted me enough to let me close. Worth every uncomfortable night. You were so stubborn about it, Penelope said, laughing at the memory. I felt terrible making you sleep out there. I would have slept in the desert if that was what it took to make you feel safe. Bennett grew more serious. You had been through so much. You needed to know you could trust me, that I would never take advantage or push you into something you were not ready for. The barn was just a building. Your peace of mind was everything. It was what made me fall in love with you, you know. Your patience, your willingness to let me come to you in my own time. I had never met a man like you before. And I had never met a woman brave enough to face down outlaws with a cast iron pan. Bennett chuckled. I knew that day I was going to marry you. I just had to convince you of it. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky deepened from orange to purple to the first stars of twilight. Inside, they could hear Rose playing the piano, the notes of a hymn drifting out through the open windows, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, the chirp of crickets, the soft nicker of horses in the barn, all the familiar sounds of the life they had built together. I have been thinking, Bennett said after a while. Thomas is fully capable of running the ranch now. What would you say to doing some traveling? We could go back east, let you visit Philadelphia, show you that you have nothing to be ashamed of. Or we could go out to California, see the ocean. Anywhere you want to go, now is the time. Penelope considered it. Once, the thought of returning to Philadelphia would have filled her with dread and shame. But that was a lifetime ago. She was not the frightened, scandal-tainted girl who had fled anymore. She was Penelope Holloway, respected rancher's wife, mother, member of the community. She had nothing to prove to anyone, least of all the people who had condemned her all those years ago. I would like that, she said. But Bennett, I do not need to go anywhere to be happy. I already have everything I could possibly want right here. So do I, Bennett replied softly. But it might be nice to have an adventure together. Just the two of us, like we are young again. We are not that old, Penelope protested, laughing. Speak for yourself. I am feeling every one of my 53 years. You are as strong and vital as the day I met you. Flatterer. But Bennett was smiling. All right, then. Let us plan a trip. Somewhere exciting. Somewhere we have never been. As long as I am with you, anywhere is exciting, Penelope said, and she meant it. They planned their trip for the following spring. Thomas would run the ranch with the help of the hired men. William would come home from his studies to help. Rose would stay with Sarah in town, much to the girls' delight. Everything was arranged. But before they could leave, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. At 43 years old, she had thought her childbearing years were long behind her, but nature had other plans. It was a shock and admittedly a worry, but also a joy. One more blessing, one more life to cherish. Their last child, a boy they named Daniel, was born healthy and strong in early 1896. The trip was postponed, but neither Bennett nor Penelope minded. There would be time for traveling later. For now, they had a baby to love and a family to continue nurturing. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own mix of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. They celebrated weddings and births, mourned losses, weathered droughts, and good years. Through it all, Bennett and Penelope remained each other's anchor and strength. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1903, their children threw them a party. All of them came home. Sarah with her husband and 4 children, Thomas with his wife and 2 children, William with his new bride, Rose with her young man who everyone knew she would marry soon, and Daniel, a rambunctious 7-year-old who was the image of his father. The house overflowed with love and laughter and the kind of chaotic joy that only a large family could create. At one point, Bennett pulled Penelope away from the crowd and led her out to the barn. The same barn where she had slept those first few weeks, afraid to trust, afraid to hope. Remember when this barn was the only place you felt safe? Bennett asked, leaning against one of the stalls. I remember everything about those days, Penelope said. I was so broken, Bennett, so afraid. I did not think I would ever feel whole again. But you did, we both did. Bennett reached out and tucked a strand of gray-streaked blonde hair behind her ear. We healed each other. We did, Penelope agreed. She looked around the barn, at the place that had once been her refuge and her prison. I cannot imagine sleeping out here now. The thought of being separated from you, even by the distance between the barn and the house, is unbearable. Good thing you trust me now, Bennett said with a smile. I trust you with my life, with my heart, with everything I am. Bennett pulled her into his arms and kissed her, just as deeply and passionately as he had on their wedding day, a quarter-century before. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. 25 years, Bennett murmured, and I love you more now than I did then. I love you more than words can express, Penelope replied. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for sleeping in the barn until I was ready. Thank you for giving me the time and space to heal. You were worth waiting for. You have always been worth everything. They walked back to the house, hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family and celebrate the life they had built together. A life that had started with fear and blood and desperate flight, but had transformed into something beautiful and lasting. As they reached the porch, Sarah called out, "There you are! We were about to send out a search party. Come on, Rose is about to make a toast." They rejoined the celebration, surrounded by children and grandchildren, by love and laughter, and the certain knowledge that they had found their forever in each other. The Wild West had been tamed. The frontier had moved on, but the love between Bennett and Penelope Holloway remained as wild and untamed and fierce as it had been in those early days when everything was uncertain except their growing feelings for each other. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Bennett and Penelope stood on their porch one more time, looking out at the land they had built their life on. No regrets? Bennett asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. Not a single one, Penelope replied, as she always did. This is my home. You are my home. You have been since the day you chose to sleep in the barn rather than make me uncomfortable. That was when I knew you were different. That was when I knew I could trust you. And I knew from the moment you walked into my life that you were going to change everything. I just did not realize how much for the better it would be. They went inside together, into the house that was filled with the echoes of laughter and love, into the life they had fought so hard to build and protect. And as they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, Penelope thought about how far she had come from that terrified woman who had stumbled into Pecos with blood on her dress and nowhere to go. She had found her place. She had found her person. She had found her home. And it had all started with a cowboy who loved her enough to give her the space and time she needed to heal, who was willing to sleep in a barn until she trusted him, who proved through patience and kindness and unwavering protection that not all men were to be feared. Bennett Holloway had saved her life in every way that mattered, and in return, she had given him back his capacity for joy and love and hope. It was, Penelope reflected as she lay in bed that night, with Bennett's arms around her, exactly the happy ending she had never dared to dream of. But it was real. It was hers, and she would treasure it every day for the rest of her life. The Wild West had been her salvation and her home. But more than that, it had given her Bennett, and that was the greatest gift of all. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask them to tell the story of how they met, Bennett and Penelope would sit together and recount the tale. They would talk about stagecoach robberies and outlaws, about cast iron pans and sleeping in barns, about learning to trust and daring to love again. They would talk about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be. And at the end of the story, Bennett would always pull Penelope close and say, "Your grandmother was afraid to sleep under the same roof when she first came here. So I slept in the barn until she trusted me. Best decision I ever made. And Penelope would smile and add, and agreeing to stay was the best decision I ever made, because I found love in the most unexpected place with the most extraordinary man. Their love story became legend in Pecos, passed down through generations as an example of patience and courage and the kind of love that endures through every trial. Long after Bennett and Penelope were gone, their descendants would still tell the tale of the cowboy who slept in the barn and the woman who learned to trust again, and how together they built something that lasted. Because that is what real love does. It endures, it perseveres, it transforms fear into faith and strangers into family. And it all started with a simple act of respect, a cowboy willing to wait, and a woman brave enough to take a chance on happiness one more time. Their story was one of heartache and healing, of danger and deliverance, of loss and love regained. It was a Wild West romance in the truest sense, full of adventure and courage and the kind of passionate, devoted love that poets write about and people dream of finding. Bennett and Penelope Holloway lived long, full lives, surrounded by family and love until the very end. They died within months of each other, Bennett at 82 and Penelope at 74, still devoted to each other, still in love after more than 5 decades of marriage. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to go on forever. Their tombstone bore a simple inscription chosen by their children. He waited, she trusted. Together, they loved. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the fear and pain that had brought them together, but the love and trust that had sustained them through everything life threw their way. From broken beginnings to a beautiful ending, theirs was a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of patience, the courage to trust again, and the transformative nature of true love. The Wild West had been unforgiving and harsh, a place where survival was never guaranteed and danger lurked around every corner. But it had also been a place where two wounded souls found each other, healed together, and built something lasting and beautiful. That was the legacy of Bennett and Penelope Holloway. Not just the land they tamed or the family they raised, but the proof that love, real love, could overcome anything, even fear, even grief, even the darkest moments of the past. All it took was a willingness to wait, a courage to trust, and two hearts brave enough to love again.